Hello everyone, it's Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore here, and I'd like to welcome you to the MuseScore Café. So, this is the first Wednesday of the month, it's December 7th, and so this is the Ask Me Anything session where all questions are welcome, especially questions about MuseScore, but if questions come up about music in general, that's good too. But yeah, we'll take questions about MuseScore 3, questions about MuseScore 4, questions about anything relating to the world of MuseScore. So I want to just put in my little plug for the MuseScore 4 course, which I am busy updating, and I've added a bunch of videos last night. Basically every day for the next couple of weeks, I'm just going to upload a whole bunch of videos, and hopefully by the time MuseScore 4 actually releases, it'll be a relatively complete course. Speaking of MuseScore 4 releasing, there is a target date for mid-month that they're looking at. They're hoping to get it ready in time to release mid-month. If it doesn't happen by mid-month, they'll probably say, well, let's wait till after Christmas and New Year's and just put it off till January. So it's either going to happen mid-month or it'll happen in January. I don't know. I kind of feel like they're going to do it the mid-month, though. I guess we'll see. So, anyhow, thanks everyone checking in here and letting me know where you're all from. It's always good to know things. And also, so I want to also apologize for the fact that those of you trying to do the holiday fake book thing, and I posted a couple of videos earlier this week, as has now been pointed out to me, those videos were recorded incorrectly. I was only sharing my one screen and not the whole thing with the camera and the keyboard, so the videos ended up not being very useful. So as soon as this is over, I will be re-recording those videos, and it'll be slightly different because it'll cover the same material, but it's not like I'm working from a script. But it'll be the same material, but this time hopefully where you can see my hands and see my demonstrations. So in any case, questions. I see that Dave has asked a question already about the beaming, and yeah, let me show you this. And so what you had, I remember exactly what it was. More or less. You had, here, let's even create a grand staff score just so it looks the same. We had a grand staff, and as I recall, it was G, and you had a low G, and then a 16th rest, and then a 16th note D, and then some eighth notes. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, it wasn't exactly this, but we get the idea. It was something of the nature of this type of pattern in which, and yeah, I could find the exact thing, but I think you recognize it from this. And the point is, by default, MuseScore does not beam over this rest, right? So by default, there is not going to be a beam over that rest. Nothing that you can do. So nothing you do just fiddling with notes. It was in 2/4. Okay, yeah, that explains why I have these extra beats here. Well, let's go ahead and change that. Let's just go ahead and change that, just to make sure it's not about default beaming rules or anything like that. So I've got that pattern, and as we can see, it is not going to beam over that rest. No matter what I do, I could try entering eighth notes, G and D, and then turn that eighth note into a dotted eighth, and then I think you mentioned undoing it, but if I undo it, it just returns it the way it was. But if I go ahead and add that dot, and then I press 4 to turn it into an eighth note, I do have a rest again, but it is not going to beam over that rest. The only way MuseScore will ever beam over that rest is if you come over to Beam Properties in the palette. In MuseScore 4, there's the palette beam properties, but you will also be able to use the inspector, what is now called properties actually, to do the same thing. So if I open beam properties here with the rest selected, now when I hit the beam middle button, it will beam over that. And if I now select this, here, let's change the pitches here so they're just that. And let me delete what's in here. If I select this measure and press R, I'm going to get exactly the same thing. So what I think, in fact, I can just absolutely bet, is when you did the beam middle on the rest, you also did it on the first note. You must have selected the whole first beat, I guess, probably. But in any case, you definitely had selected the first note and made it beam middle. When you do that, we don't see any ill effects from it. But as soon as I repeat this measure, you can see exactly what happens. MuseScore wasn't able to obey your command to make this G the middle of a beam, because there was nothing before it. But when you repeated that measure, MuseScore says, now I can finally obey the command you gave me earlier. I can make that G be the middle of a beam. And that's exactly what it does. It makes that G the middle of the beam. So unbeknownst to you, or beyond what you're remembering, you must have selected that G and set it to beam middle. And you can see that if you go to your score, click that note, open the beam properties palette, you will see it has been set to beam middle. And when that happens, you get this effect of beaming across the bar line. And it's a deliberate effect. It is a feature because a lot of piano music does do this, not just piano music, but a lot of different types of music that use different types of hemiola rhythms and cross rhythms and so forth will deliberately beam across a bar line, and that is how you do it, by setting the first note of the measure to beam middle. So that's hopefully answers that question well. I'm going to scroll here and see if I missed any other questions along the way. I don't see any other questions, so I'm ready for someone else to ask a question. So how do you fix it? Well, again, it's not broken. MuseScore has done exactly what you asked it to do. But if you've changed your mind and you don't want that to be beam middle, just set it back to auto. And you could do that with the first note too. Set it to auto. The only thing that should have beam middle set is the rest. So, in fact, if you just want to select everything, you can do select all, and then click the auto button, and then you can just click, and that will make sure everything is set back to auto, and then you can just say select all similar elements on the same staff, and this selects just the rests on that staff. Or you could just control click the rests you want and just set those to beam middle, or just have done it right the first time. So the beam properties is that is how it works. If you set something to beam middle, you're saying, hey, if there's something before it and after that you can beam to, do it. The beam start says, go ahead and beam this note to a following note if there is one, but don't let anything beam into it. And then the no beam button says, don't beam this thing in or out. So one word about this, start beam won't force beaming that counters the time signature. So for instance, if I put this D here to be start beam, it's not going to actually do anything. Oh, that's interesting. Well, I guess it broke the that's correct. It undid, it caused the beam over the rest to stop there. But it didn't, start beam didn't force it to actually start a beam here, because this G here knows better than to be in the middle of a beam. If you had wanted that D to be connected to the G, the way to do it is put beam middle on the G. Can you beam across staves? Yes, this is cross staff notation. So if I want this G to be a staff above, the shortcut is Control Shift up. And now it's on the staff above. And in MuseScore 4, there's actually an icon on the toolbar that you can have to do the same thing. So Control Shift up, Control Shift down, and as usual, I assume on Mac it's Command. Now, the beam default is going to depend on your pitches, and sometimes this beam in the middle is what you want. Sometimes, though, you really want it above or below, so you can just drag it where you want it. But the default position is going to be in the middle. Normally you wouldn't do that for a G in that octave, but if it was a G in this octave, why bother putting that lower G in the top staff? So normally you would only do that if it's on the staff. So there's some things about that. All right, so let's get on to Graham's question. And Colleen, great to have you here for the whole time. That's going to be cool. So Graham, about sharing without publishing it on MuseScore, so I assume you mean MuseScore.com first. What I recommend is, and let me show you this. let's go over to, I guess, a new window, because I don't have one open. Uh, I'm going to open the community here, and let me show you how I recommend doing this. So what I'm going to recommend is, let's say you want to share something in this share and discuss space here. Hopefully, if I've done things right, you'll see at the top a link to the how-to article here, how to share your music. And this gives you, when you click that, it takes you to the how-to article on how to do the sharing. And it still involves MuseScore.com, but notice this statement here. You can also use unlisted to prevent the score from being visible outside this community. So when you upload your score, set it to unlisted. Then it won't be visible anywhere else. But then when you go to actually get the link to the score, make sure you click where it says secret link. So let me actually show you what that looks like. If I go to MuseScore.com and I grab one of my scores, so I'm looking at one of my scores, I click the three dots, no, not the three dots, sorry, I click the share button, you'll see secret link. That's what I want to grab, the secret link. So now I can copy, and then I can paste that into my post. So start a post, paste the thing. And what will show up while you're editing is just this kind of thumbnail image thing, but then after you post, it will actually be a playable thing. So that is what I recommend, because for a couple reasons. One is then people can listen to it without having to download it, because if I post this right now, people will be able to play it directly in the community. So that's one great reason to still use MuseScore.com, but use unlisted if you don't want to share it widely. Another reason, though, is just storage space wise. There's limited storage on this site, or it's unlimited. All you can pay for storage, basically. So scores aren't that big, so it's probably not that big of a concern. But the bigger concern is the first one. It's you want people to be able to listen to your score right away without having to download it and then upload it and then load it into MuseScore and hope they have the right version. So that's what I recommend. Now, I will say, you have to be careful to get that secret link. Very often, myself included, I'll share something unlisted and forget to use the secret link. And then you'll end up with a link that just doesn't work for anyone. And then someone will tell you, and then you can fix it. So that's that story. All right. So Michael's got a question here now. Making changes to parts rather than the score. Now, so Michael, in order to really answer that question, I would probably need like the actual score and steps, what exactly you're doing. But I will tell you a couple of known kind of issues that can show up with this. So let me come back to MuseScore, and let's look at the MuseScore Café theme here. The MuseScore Café theme has some chord symbols, and if I open the guitar part, we see the chord symbols. This isn't transposed, though, so let me add a chord symbol to the trumpet part. Let's just select the first note and add a B flat 7. And then let's go ahead and turn off concert pitch. Now, in principle, when I did that, it just went to the next page because now suddenly it couldn't fit anymore. It does say C7, and if I visit the trumpet part, it will say C7. If I change this to be, I don't know, C7 sharp 9, then, because this is actually the sharp 9 of the chord, if I look again at the score, it should be C7 sharp 9. So in principle, that stuff always should work. Now, and so anytime you change either anything that you change that is considered content. One second. Just wanted to mute my other system here because I'm hearing it coming through the headphones. anything that's considered change of content. So changing a chord symbol, changing any form of text, or if I decided to take this whole passage down an octave, that will also reflect in the parts. So those kinds of changes, changes to content, text, the actual, spelling of your chord, the actual pitch of your notes, the duration of your notes, anything that's would actually sound different when played, those changes will be linked. The things that aren't linked are formatting changes. Like, for instance, if in the, let me undo that, if I drag this chord symbol down here in the part, it won't be reflected in the score. And that's for a good reason. This is because, well, that change that I just made doesn't really make any sense. There's no reason to do that. However, in the score, maybe I say, well, just to save a little space and avoid collisions between staves. Like, look at this. The word mute actually applies to the guitar. It's telling the guitar to, it's that muted sound here. But where it's written, it kind of looks like it's applying to the trombone. So that's a little not ideal. So just for the score, I might move it to where it's more obviously applying to just the guitar. But in the part, I don't need it to do that. I'm happier having the word mute above the chord symbol. So it's very common that, if you're moving things around to avoid collisions in the score, you won't need to do it in the part, or vice versa. So position adjustments and things like that, formatting adjustments, are not linked between them so that you can do those things independently. Now, getting to what you said about transposition. Here's the thing I know that will go wrong. Let me undo all my changes. All right. If I change the transposition, and we go back to concert pitch off, if I decide, you know what, instead of alto sax, I want to use soprano sax. If I try to change the instrument now, if I go to staff part properties and hit change instrument and change this thing to soprano saxophone, bad things are going to happen. Let's watch. So far looks good in the score. It transposed and gave me the no key signature as I expect. But let's look at the part. Whoa! What happened here? I'm saying that to express fake surprise. It doesn't work, is the bottom line. There is a bug where if after generating the parts, you change transposition of one of the instruments, you get weird glitches like this. This is totally not the right octaves. So things like that can go wrong if you change transposition after changing the parts. Now, I've never seen that happen with chord symbols specifically, but I could believe it. I could totally believe the same thing would happen with chord symbols, maybe. So that is my best guess. If you ever do get it to a point where you have a specific score and you can give me a specific step-by-step series of instructions to reproduce the problem, then I'm happy to look further. All right. So that's basically the best I can do, Michael. If you want to try to elaborate, I can try to answer further. And let's see if I still don't see any other questions. So come on, let's get some more questions here. Yeah, let me just flip over to MuseScore 4 for a second, just so I can show you a couple of things that I was talking about. When I mentioned there's a beam properties on the palette, if I select a note that's beamed, I don't even know if it has to be beamed, you'll see that if I click under properties beam, I'm going to have all those same icons here to select the different things. So I can force something to be beam middle or no beam, all these same things here. So yeah, so there's beam, there's that. And then for the cross staff notation, it's not on the toolbar by default, but if I hit the gear icon and then scroll around, I think it's at the bottom here somewhere. Oh, here's where I can enable. So right now, this icon of a closed eye is meant to mean this thing is not shown. And now I click it, and it's an open eye, and now I have the cross staff beaming button on my toolbar. So there's customization like that. So Graham's question is a good one. Like, what are the biggest advantages of MuseScore 4? So what are the biggest advantages? And that's a good question because realistically, there's more similar than different except for playback. No, that's not true. Playback and engraving. Basically, the bottom line is scores will look better. That's the main reason that applies to virtually everyone. The spacing of notes and so forth is going to be better in MuseScore 4. Spacing of the notes, positioning of the slurs and ties and beams, and everything about how the notes look is just significantly better. I mean, to the point where in MuseScore 3, Finale, Sibelius, and Dorico people are like, yeah, you guys, MuseScore is free software and it's kind of junky. It doesn't look as good as we look. With MuseScore 4, we have completely leapfrogged Finale and Sibelius in terms of how good scores will look by default. And if you go back and watch one of my earlier Cafe episodes on that, I show some examples. But yeah, the default layout of your score is really significantly improved. Not in ways, I mean, MuseScore 3 doesn't look terrible to the naked eye, just casual looking, but any publisher, any professional editor or engraver would look at it and go, yeesh. There's all sorts of weird things that happen with the spacing of the notes and the layout of things. So MuseScore 4 is basically better than Finale or Sibelius now, and almost on par with Dorico, which is kind of the state of the art here. So that's one set of changes. The other one is playback. And the thing is, the default playback in MuseScore 4 and in let me see here, in MuseScore 3 isn't that different, but you've heard me talk about Muse Sounds, and I've played demos before, but just on the hopes that maybe it comes through a little bit here, I'm going to play something that maybe you haven't heard. That's just another little example. Well, now I'm going to play my good one because I like it. And does MuseScore 4 work with Windows 10? Yes, as long as you've been updating your Windows 10. If I think you have to have installed the update from a year and a half ago or something like that. Because if you don't have all the recent, if you've got too old of a Windows 10 version that doesn't have whatever update, you'll have to update it. So the Muse Sounds library for orchestral instruments is really pretty stunning, I think, in what it can do. And I'm just going to play you a little section of this piece from the end because I think it's a good example here of what you can hear. And I think it will actually play without stuttering too much. So we'll find out here. Okay, maybe not. Sometimes when I'm live streaming, it doesn't respond as well as I would like. So that could be that it's just not going to cooperate right now. And if so, I'm not going to belabor it, but I will tell you that the playback with this Muse Sounds library is phenomenal if you're doing orchestral type of music. For jazz things, not so much. For choral music, it's also way better. So way better engraving and the potential for way better playback are the main reasons. And then other than that, it's just window dressing differences. Okay, so now let's come back to some other questions. And it is bothering me that this won't play right now. Because, it should. But whatever. Too much else going on, I guess. So Stephen's asking about spanning an arpeggio across staves. And so I'm going to assume when you talk about arpeggio, you don't mean what I'm talking about here. Oh, yeah, rods. Yeah, so, yeah, actually, that's a great example here. Rod, I'm just going to, grab your score because it's a great example, and I know I can just play that audio. So it was, actually, I can just play the one. I can play mine here, but I'll play your audio a little bit later if there's time. Here's some trumpets at the beginning. So that is, I can't tell you how many times better than any other synthesized trumpet you might use. Here's that spot where I was going to have played before. All right, even MuseScore.com doesn't want to play right now. Okay, so yeah. So as far as, here we go. Let's check out this. Oh, I love the horns. That's simple, right? Oh my God. So there you go. That's little sample there. I mean, it's really incredible what it can do for orchestral music. For jazz, for smaller ensembles, it's good, but it's really orchestral music where it really shines. So, and now there's not a ton of learning because mostly, as I said, it's window dressing. I mean, you can still see here's a toolbar, it's arranged a little different. Here's palettes, there's some little differences here and there. In my course, I lay out all the differences and go into detail about how things work. And of course, you can have both of them installed so you can, transition as gradually as you want. All right, let me flip back here and get back to the question about arpeggios. So, and I'll come back to more MuseScore 4 stuff, but I do want to answer the other questions. So, Marla, that score is, actually, let me just post the link to it because this is the score I've been using as a demo all over the place. And let me just get it. Into the chat, and then, later on, well, go ahead and click the link now, get it up in a browser window, maybe have it playing in the background if you want, or just wait until it's over to listen to it. But I've been posting that link all over the place and using it for different things. So, still trying to get to the question about arpeggios. So this is an arpeggio, right? And it's cross staff there, but I'm assuming you mean the arpeggio symbol, where you have a chord like the following, C, E, G, and then in the right hand, you also have a C, an E, and a G, and you want to ripple the chords up like that. And so you go ahead and put a arpeggio symbol, and now you want to get that to be across both staves. So the way to do that, it's not totally supported, but it's supported enough to be useful. If I click the bottom handle of that arpeggio, notice I only added the arpeggio to the top staff. Shift down moves it to the bottom staff. That's the short answer right there. Now, playback wise, it's not going to go, it's not going to play the notes one at a time like that. It's going to play them together. Let's hear that. So it went like that. So it's not perfect for the playback. Someday that will probably be supported. But for now, at least to get it to display right, that's the trick. Add it to the top and then shift down to extend the arpeggio downward. And you don't have to disable automatic placement. You don't have to muck around with it. It'll always work. So there's that. And now, so let me come back to some other questions here. So Graham, yeah, as far as the learning curve, here's like one change to know about that's like the worst, I think. But I like it. It's a good change overall, but it takes getting used to. The tie shortcut has changed from plus to T. Not a big deal. It's actually a really nice thing. I like T as tie. I'm getting used to it. The reason, though, it's there is because plus is now the shortcut for sharp and minus is for flat. We've never had default shortcuts for accidentals before, and now we do. Minus, plus, and equals. The reason we haven't had them before is because no one could find a good set of shortcuts that weren't already taken, that didn't conflict with something else. And finally, someone just said, who cares? We're just going to break it right now and say tie is going to lose the plus and gain a T, and that's just the way it is. So, So there's that question, and I'll come to some of the other questions here. But I see a new name here. Rahim has a question about circled fingerings, and yes, you can definitely enter circled fingerings. And I guess the method for doing this is going to kind of depend on what instrument you're talking about. So let me know what instrument you're talking about. But if I open the fingering palette, you'll see there are circled fingerings here. These are meant to be guitar string. So that's meant to be the guitar string. Oh, and by the way, Graham, since you're not using the shortcuts anyhow, check out also what's on here. There's a tie button, and now there's a slur button, and there's articulation buttons here on the toolbar. So as far as like little improvements, yeah, there's things like that. Things that used to be buried a little deeper are a little easier to find now. So there's a few little improvements like that that you might enjoy. So these circled numbers here on the palette are meant for guitar string numbers. Okay, so they're not really meant for fingering per se. And as a result, you can certainly use it that way, but there's things about it like it's how it formats this is designed for how guitar string numbers are formatted. So if you want it to be, like if I add another note here and then I try to add another fingering to it, it's not going to necessarily display them in the right way as far as what you might want. Or maybe it is, I don't know. But the other thing you can do is just add a regular fingering using any of the normal means and then use the inspector. So I'll type F8 to open the inspector, or use View Inspector if you didn't have it open already. And then you can just use the inspector here to say frame circle. And then if you want all your fingerings to be circled, hit that Set to Style button there that's hiding a little bit underneath the chat window here. So that's ways to get circled fingerings. I want to come back and see, because there's a number of other questions here about MuseScore 4 that I'll come back to and try to take together. But I see Richard has a question here. 5-verse choral piece, second and fourth verses, different harmonies. How do I show the repeat back to verse 3, jump to 4? So unfortunately, I think I would need to see a picture of what you're talking about. Show the repeat, because what it sounds like is this is a question of how to even notate this. Say you had pencil and paper, how would you notate this? Usually if it's significantly different, you wouldn't try to all notate it in one thing with repeats. You would write something like, let's see if I can just cobble something up quickly here. Close my inspector. If I have a repeated section here, so I have an open repeat here, close repeat there, and so what I showed before about uploading to MuseScore.com is the easiest way to do it, and then you can post the link here in the chat. That would be one way. But I think I know what you're getting at. So let's see. You have some notes here, and you have verses 1, and then 3 and 5 here, and then somewhere over here you have verses 2 and 4. Because if they're significantly different, right, I'm assuming you don't, because if you had all 5 verses here, then the repeats would just work. So I'm assuming you're trying to make up a roadmap in which it's clear that you play this section, then this section, then come back here, and then here, and then here. So it's, yeah, what I would probably do if I were you, thinking this through. Someone else, feel free to answer about this also, because I'm thinking on my feet here. But I'm kind of thinking that this might be the answer, so that on the first verse we read the first verse, on the first repeat we read the first verse and then the second verse, and then on the repeat we read 3 and 4, and then we repeat back for 5. So a roadmap like this is simple. You could probably do it with DS's and whatnot, but that's a little more complicated, I would have to say, but it's doable. So let's whoops, not that measure, but this measure. Let me do this. Um, if I had this section followed by this section, I would put this. Now, those repeats just aren't going to work because it's going to try to play both of those in a row. So I really don't even want to repeat here at all. I don't want repeats. You'd have to do this with DSs and so forth. I think this is the way to go, but that's really off the cuff. And yeah, there might be other methods, but I think I would go with something like this personally. So hopefully that's clear what I'm doing. And then you can, yeah, but I don't know that there's a way to do it. I mean, even if you use the DS approach, even if you use the DS, you're still going to have two different sections. I mean, if you say they're different harmonies, I mean, I guess I don't know what you mean by different. If it's just like one note different, well, by all means, you can put them all in here and then just put a note, like say the second note here is 2/8 notes instead of a quarter note. Well, that's common enough. We would notate that using a second voice. So I'd use voice 2 and enter a rest actually probably and make that invisible with V, and then I would enter my 2/8 notes, C, B, and I would make both of those notes small in the inspector. So under the chord section, hit small, and then back to the C, make that small. So this is how that sort of stuff is done very commonly in notated, in published music where, and let me make that rest. I'm going to go to the view menu, turn off invisible items so you can see this a little better. So that you can see that we have, one set of notes that's used for most of the verses, but the small notes used for the verses that need it. That's a common way to try to save some space by not requiring it all to be written out. And yes, as Dave says, you can use the unroll repeats tool to write stuff out for you, but that doesn't solve the problem of making it shorter. It just simplifies the problem of how to write it out twice. But you could just as easily copy and paste. So yeah, if you can get the example up here, we can take a look a little deeper. But yeah, something I really think. Yeah, it depends on how different they are. If it is just a difference of a little note or two here, then using this approach of a small note in another voice to indicate what happens on verse 2, that's totally acceptable. But if they're really significantly different, I don't see any way around having to write them out twice if they're significantly different. So meanwhile, I'm going to come back to some other questions. Bob has a question. Scores already uploaded. Will they benefit from being converted to 4? So yeah, if you've already uploaded a score, I mean, presumably you still have it on your computer also. Yeah, by all means, load it into MuseScore 4. It will then look better. And then update it to use MuseSounds, which, depending on how things are set up, will either happen automatically or not. And then just save online again, and then it will replace the version that was there with the new, better looking, better sounding version. Again, as far as the sound, like the MuseScore Café theme does not sound better in MuseSounds because there's not jazz instruments. I mean, yes, there's a trumpet, but it can't play the high note. Ba-doo-ba-doo-ba-dee. And it stops short on that high E flat because this note here is not part of MuseSounds because it's D flat concert, E flat written. That's beyond the range of an ordinary classical trumpet player, and so it's not part of the thing. Now, eventually they'll probably fix that, but there's no guitar sounds in MuseSounds yet. There's no drum set sounds. There's no fretless electric bass yet. Some of these things will be coming eventually, but yeah, there will be certain types of scores for which you're not gonna benefit from it. But it will look better. It'll definitely look better. There's basically nothing but improvements in the look. Now, Dave's asking something about MuseHub. And MuseHub is the tool that is used to download MuseScore and to download MuseSounds, and it is designed to work as a background service. So once you start MuseHub, it stays running so that it can update sounds in the background. You can shut it down if you want, but by default, it's designed to stay running so that when updates come along, they are immediately available. Now, there was another question in here. Does MuseSound system completely replace the sound fonts? No, they're both available. So like when I play my MuseScore Cafe theme in MuseScore 4, I just use the default sound font, which is essentially the same as it was in MuseScore 3. You know, I think they replaced a couple things here and there, tweaked how the reverb worked a bit. But it's essentially the same sounds by default. So you can still use the default sound font, and if you've got other sound fonts, you can still use those in MuseScore 4. The one thing that isn't there is if you're using a non-standard, like a non-general MIDI sound font. If you have a sound font that's just, say, your favorite Renaissance instruments, using that will become trickier because it won't be possible to select which sound within that sound font you want to use for any given instrument. So you'll have to have separate recorder font, you know, soprano recorder font, alto recorder sound font, etc. You'll have to have separate sound fonts for each sound. Or you can use VST instruments. VST instruments allow you to have a whole set of different sounds all in a single instrument. And I did a cafe episode a couple months ago about using VST instruments, and that's another option. So yeah, you will have more options in MuseScore 4. You'll have sound fonts, you'll have VST, and Muse sounds. So Dan's asking, aside from downloading MuseScore 4, are there additional pieces that need to be downloaded? And yes, the Muse sounds. So the way that you download MuseScore 4 is through this thing called Muse Hub. And Muse Hub, let me just show you what it looks like. So on my Linux system, I have to start it a little funny here because it's a special Linux system. But you normally don't have to mess with the terminal. It's only because I have a special Linux system. So Muse Hub is this tool here, and on Windows and Mac, this is also where you will download MuseScore itself from. On Linux, you just download it separately. But what you'll see here is it is now, as soon as I started it up, it is downloading updated versions of some of the sounds. So these are the sounds. There's choir, there's percussion, keys. If I click on one of these, it'll tell me what's in the set. There's just a harpsichord, an upright piano, you know, regular piano, organ, Wurlitzer, all these different sounds that are part of that keys set. So there's percussion, there's tons of instruments in that percussion set. There's brass, there's woodwinds, basically orchestral instruments. So the Muse Hub is where you will get MuseScore itself from, unless you're on Linux, but it's also where you will get the Muse sounds from. So let's see if I've missed anything else along the way. Oh, and by the way, when you install Muse Sounds, that will become the default for all new scores, or for scores that were imported from MuseScore 3, I think. But yeah, I think that is the case. But then you can choose, you know, whether you want to use Muse Sounds or whether you want to use sound fonts, and you can choose instrument by instrument. You can say, oh, I want to use the Muse Sounds string section, but I still need to use sound fonts for the trumpet because it can't play high enough, etc. So you can mix and match instrument by instrument. So let's see if I've missed anything else, and then by all means, feel free to just remind me of a question that's been asked already. So, accordion for the duplicated button rows. Oh, okay. Well, that's cool. So yeah, that's something I didn't even know about until this morning, was that accordion had some types of accordion anyhow have multiple keyboards. I've only seen the kind, or I've only been aware of seeing the kind that just has a single 2-octave keyboard here and then buttons for chord symbols, but there's accordions that have tons of buttons that basically does a whole piano keyboard with each hand. I didn't even know that was a thing. So hopefully my fingering question answered that well enough. So fingerings for accordion, circled and not circled, both typical. The inspector way is slow. So, okay, so I'm not sure what you mean by slow, because once you hit set as style, now it's done for all of them. So whatever you did, like if you look at my example here, once I set that one fingering to be circled, now they'll all be circled. So if I start entering more fingerings here, like I have a shortcut Control Alt F, and if I enter a fingering there, it's already circled, and I can just boom, 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 and type in all my fingers as lickety split. So there's nothing, it takes an extra 5 seconds to set one to be circle and set as style, but set as style is definitely the key, because once you have done that, you can enter as many fingerings as you want, as fast as you can type, and they'll all be circled. If you don't want them, you said it's going to need them both circled, well then use two different types. So like for instance, this here is the fingering type. But if I add, another type, if I add, say, if I come over to the palette here and type this one just using the, what did I just do? Oh, this is the guitar, a different fingering style. There's different fingering styles basically, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now these aren't circled, right? So you can choose between the regular piano fingering, guitar left hand, guitar right hand, and string number. You can have them each different styles, and then once you've started entering one, you can enter as many as you want here. Dave, why are you getting adverts here? Where are you getting adverts? Here in the stream? I wouldn't expect that to be the case, but I'll be curious. So about the choral sounds, yeah. Actually, let me see if I can play you a choral piece here. Let me close my orchestra score because it was kind of a little too much, I think, for the system. And let me bring up a short little choral score that I created so you can hear the choral sounds. Now it's not lyrics. You're not going to get lyrics, but it's more natural sounding. That's about all, the best I could word it is it's definitely just more natural sounding voices. So Dave's asking also, for people who publish scores to MuseScore.com, does it make sense to have versions for 3 and 4? I don't know, if you feel like it. I personally can't be bothered because I'm going to write my scores in MuseScore 4, and then getting into MuseScore 3 means exporting it to Music XML and then importing it into MuseScore 3. I can't imagine wanting to do that personally. But yeah, I can see why you might, if you really want to make your scores, and for that matter, make it available in MuseScore 2 format too while you're at it. But I don't know. I'm not. So right now it's set to MS Basic because I created this one before MuseSounds became the default. So I'm going to go to View, Playback Setup, and select MuseSounds. Activate this profile, go. All right, when I play this one now, this is going to be, whoa, shoot, it didn't update. That's because this was created with a beta version. This stuff happens automatically when you do it for real. But if I select, say, altos for the top staff and select basses for the bottom staff, and I'm choosing that rather than tenors because if I choose tenors for the bottom staff, the low notes really don't sound at all. Yeah, let's see how this does. Let's see if it'll play back for me. Not a good sign. I'm clicking it and I'm not hearing anything. All right, I feel like I need to maybe just quit MuseScore 4 and restart it, and that has something to do with why I'm not getting sound. Let me just close MuseScore 3 right now also. Ah, okay, yeah, if you type MuseScore.com, it'll try to linkify it. It'll produce a little box, a little thumbnail, just like the thumbnail of a score. So yeah, I could see that you would see the thumbnail for MuseScore.com. That makes sense. All right, let me start MuseScore 4, restart MuseScore 4, and see if I can get some choral sounds to play. Meanwhile, if we get other questions in here, I'm happy to answer other questions. Still, we got some time left. I don't always have to go an hour, but that's a typical thing, and I feel like especially for these Ask Me Anything sessions, I should keep taking questions that long. So yeah, as always, unfortunately, my system while I'm streaming becomes slow, and this is my faster system. I'm a little surprised because it hasn't been this slow while I'm streaming before, but it definitely is right now. And for that, uh, I am sorry. But let's see if we can get some choral sounds happening here. So I've loaded my score. So these aren't the regular sounds. These are the old standard sounds. But now, if I come to actually, since I know that playback setup didn't work, I'm just going to go ahead. Let me open the mixer and make sure I just select them in here. Muse sounds, choir, altos, muse sounds, choir, basses. All right, let's hear what it sounds like now. So that's choir sounds for you. So yeah, I mean it's still it's not lyrics, but it's quite a bit more natural sounding, right? Quite a bit more natural sounding. And yeah, so the thing is, as far as MuseScore.com goes, sure there will be people who still have MuseScore 3, but it's not like they can't also have MuseScore 4, right? So, you know, if you put a MuseScore 4 score there, it doesn't prevent them from accessing it. They could still load it into MuseScore 4, even if they use MuseScore 3 for their own scores. Also, let's be honest here, most scores posted to MuseScore.com never get downloaded. Or if they do get downloaded, they never get loaded into MuseScore. They're just going to be heard online. And you don't have to have MuseScore 4 installed to be able to hear a MuseScore 4 score posted online. So yeah, the actual benefit of putting up the MuseScore 3 version of the score is pretty minimal, I have to say. But yeah, by all means, if you think that there's going to be someone who's going to download your score who won't have MuseScore 4 installed at all, and that's a limiter, well then by all means, give them a MuseScore 3 version also. But I really think that we're talking about like, you know, a fraction of a percent of people that will actually benefit from that. Okay. What else? I feel like I saw something else in here. I know Richard said he was going to try to post something, but I haven't quite seen it yet. Oh, Dan is asking about that PreSonus Revelator microphone. And yeah, that microphone you got looks like a nice one. I've heard some nice things about it, but I haven't tried it. And can you use MuseScore 3 with Muse sounds? No. This is one of the reasons why MuseScore 4 has taken so long to get out, and why realistically, feature-wise, it doesn't have a whole lot additional to offer, is because everything under the hood had to be re-architected to make things like Muse sounds possible. So there's an enormous amount of re-architecture under the hood to make Muse sounds possible. So yeah, that is why MuseScore 4 exists. That's why they didn't just produce Muse sounds and add it to MuseScore 3. So so yeah, Dave, if you download a lot of different scores, that's great, and you want to load them up, then that's fine. But you probably find that yeah, not that many people are downloading yours, not because yours aren't worth downloading, but they're just not downloading scores, period. But like I said, they can have MuseScore 4, right? There's nothing preventing anyone from running MuseScore 4, having both of them installed on your system. I will say that if you have like very old version of Mac OS, MuseScore 4 might not work, or Muse sounds might not work because that Hub app requires, yeah, I don't know, a version within the last 5 years or so. So if you've got like a 10-year-old version of Mac OS, might not work. So yeah, there might be some people who just can't install MuseScore 4. Is re-architected a word? Sure, it actually is. It's a common one. I sometimes refer to the fact that like you know, of all, I remember saying once in class after making up a word, of all the made up words I've ever made up, of all that one was the made upiest. And so I think made-upiest is my favorite made-up word I've ever made before. Made-upiest. It's the made-upiest word I've ever made up. But no, re-architected is pretty commonly used in the technical world to mean essentially what I just meant by it. All right. Again, I'm scrolling around to see if I can find additional questions that I've missed, but by all means, just repost. And if you, oh, yeah, no, that's one I saw already. Feel free to just re-ask your question. So is PreSonus a mic with a built-in reverb? Well, it does have built-in effects. That is one thing. I think it's got additional stuff going on above and beyond just effects. Because I remember it coming up when I was searching for things like, you may know I use a mixer that has what's called a loop back capability, so that it's a technical thing, but like when I play the audio from MuseScore, it's going out into my mixer, getting mixed with my microphone and my keyboard, and coming back into the piano. And that's called loopback. And it's a feature you don't find on every single mixer, but that's why I got the one that I did. But I was searching because there are some microphones that have a built-in loopback feature and a built-in instrument input. And so if I could find one microphone that had all those features, it had an instrument input and a loopback feature, I could not need my mixer. And then I could just have that microphone and run everything that way. And Revelator was one of the ones that started to tick some of those boxes, but I think, yeah, I can't remember what the limiter was, but I think there's some reason why that's not going to solve it for me, or I just didn't feel like buying another gadget. I don't remember, to be honest. And it's great having you here, Joachim, also, because I've been doing these for quite a while, and it's great to be sharing with as many people as I can. All right. So I got time for maybe one more question, depending on, how fast they are, how fast you're able to come up with them. But, now that I have that loaded, I want to play one other score in MuseScore 4 because it's kind of fun. I made a clarinet choir version of the Music Masterclass theme, and it's pretty cool. So I'm going to play that one for you, since I think I can get away with playing it on here and not. Since it played the choral score okay, it should play this one okay. So, it's still going to take a minute to load because of how slow my system is being right now. But, and if it doesn't come up, it doesn't come up. But it would be nice if it did. Yeah. I'm going to have to reboot after this, I think. And here it comes. So the clarinet sounds, I think, especially the bass clarinet sound, I really love the bass clarinet. I'm a former bass clarinetist, and I'm just going to solo the bass clarinet sound for a second so you can hear the bass clarinet. So that's some bass clarinet. But now let's hear, and notice that's one of the new features in MuseScore 4, that you can solo staves just by selecting them, which is absolutely a blessing and a curse. But anyhow, a question from Dan about when to install MuseScore 4. So what I will say is, it's not released yet. So, we're still in beta testing stage, but we're getting close. And so I would say if you haven't dealt with installing it yet, just wait for the release, which will be in a couple weeks or so. But let's check this out. Y'all think you're in the Music Masterclass now instead of the MuseScore Café, but yeah, I just think it's nice. There's one note coming up that's a little funny. Yeah. So, and the thing is, you can install now, but it's still, it's not that it's not usable now. It is. It's basically done, but the process is a little funny. It's like a little work to download and get going right now. And so, if you're really eager to be trying things out, by all means, in the course, in the MuseScore 4 course, I have a whole lesson on how to download it and install the Muse sounds. But the problem is, it's already partially out of date because they've already released a new version since then. So I would recommend, if you're not like really gung-ho on technology, just to wait a couple weeks because it'll be simpler. But by all means, we can use more testing. So there you go. That's my show. Let me go ahead and just load the MuseScore Cafe theme as well while I'm in here. Yeah, and you can definitely have them both installed at once. So we'll hear MuseScore Cafe theme song now coming from MuseScore 4 and not using Muse sounds, so it'll sound essentially the same, although I'm still fiddling with how I want to do the falls and scoops and things. So that's still a little bit of a work in process on my part to set it up to work, because MuseScore 4 is going to handle that a little bit differently than MuseScore 3 did, the falls and the scoops and things. So once this finishes loading, I'll play some music and be out here. And bell choir music is really interesting, and yeah, it's definitely worth a discussion in the community. But this thing is loading audio samples, and that would have taken a fraction of a second normally. But here we go. So that is already fixed last night. It was working, it sounded really nice, and then they broke it, and then they just fixed it again last night. So yeah, there's still work being done, but anyhow, this has been my Ask Me Anything session in the MuseScore Cafe, so glad you all are enjoying it. And yeah, once MuseScore 4 comes out, I'm going to be mostly focused on it, but we'll still be able to talk about MuseScore 3, because I know not everyone's going to jump 100% into it, but that's where my focus will be, and I'll be encouraging others to do the same. So tomorrow, Music Masterclass, I'll be talking about chords. I'll be talking about lead sheet versions of Christmas pieces and working out chords for them. And again, for people who are doing that course, I apologize for the bad video the other day, and as soon as this is done, like right now, I'm going to go re-record those videos, repost. So hope everyone has a great day, great week. See you next time.